the child came wailing into the world beneath the hollowed halls of Casterly Rock, small and twisted, with mismatched eyes that blinked against the candlelight. His hair was pale blonde, though streaked with a darker shade, and his legs were stunted things, crooked beneath the swaddling cloth. His mother, Lady Joanna, did not survive the birthing bed. By the time the wet nurse placed the babe in Lord Tywin's arms, Joanna was already cold. From that moment, Tyrion Lannister bore the weight of his father's silent wrath. Tywin saw in his son not an heir, but a mockery of one. The Lord of Casterly Rock was a man who tolerated no blemish upon the golden lion of Lannister. Yet here was a living reminder that even lions could sire monsters. Cersei, his twin sister born 2 years before, gazed at him with the cruelty of children untempered by pity. She pinched him, mocked him, whispered in corners that he had killed their mother. And when young Tyrion, eager for her affection, built a little lion of wood and painted it gold, she shattered it to splinters before his eyes. Only Jaime, tall and golden, treated him as a brother ought. He carried Tyrion on his shoulders through the rock's echoing halls, held him steady when he wobbled in the saddle, and listened when Tyrion, small and sharp-tongued, recited lines from dusty tomes. In Jaime, the imp found his single ally, yet even love could not change the world's gaze. When Tyrion crept down to Lannisport, strangers muttered and stared. Imp, halfman, grotesque. He learned to bear the sting by laughing louder than the rest, for if they were to mock him, he would own the mockery and turn it into armor. Denied the training yard and tourney field, Tyrion turned instead to books. Histories of Aegon's conquest, ledgers of Casterly Rock stewards, treatises on siegecraft and law. He devoured them all. A mind needs books as a sword needs a whetstone, he once told Jaime, and in truth he sharpened his mind into the keenest blade he could carry. Thus Tyrion Lannister grew into manhood. Despised by his father, hated by his sister, cherished by his brother, and armed with nothing but wit, wine, and words.
Chapter 2, Tysha. It was on the road, when the world seemed wide and full of possibility, that Tyrion first tasted love. He was but a youth, riding in the shadow of his tall golden brother, when they came upon a girl half mad with fear. Bandits had scattered her kin, she said, and left her weeping by the wayside. Her name was Tysha, and she was as brown-haired and soft-smiled as any maid in song. Tyrion, awkward in body yet quick of tongue, found in her eyes something he had never known, warmth unmarred by scorn. She laughed at his jests, held his twisted hand without flinching, and when he kissed her, she kissed him back. The weeks that followed were a dream from which he never wished to wake. With Jaime's aid, they found a septon willing to bless their union. Tyrion, still scarcely more than a boy, called her wife, and in her arms believed himself, for once, no monster but a man. They shared bread and bed as husband and wife, whispering vows and futures. For those few golden days, the world's cruelty seemed held at bay. But dreams shatter easily in the halls of lions. Lord Tywin soon learned of the marriage. Summoning his sons, he spoke with the cold fury that made even hardened men tremble. He declared that Tysha was no maid of noble birth, but a whore bought for a silver coin, hired by Jaime to give his twisted brother a taste of womanhood. Tyrion's heart broke, yet worse was to come. Tywin ordered his guards to take Tysha in turn, one by one, while Tyrion was forced to watch. When they were done, Lord Tywin commanded his son forward. "A Lannister always pays his debts," he said, and made Tyrion give the girl a gold coin for his use of her body. The boy did as he was bid, though his hands shook and his soul screamed. Tysha was led away, and Tyrion never saw her again. From that day forth, he told himself love was a lie, a cruel jest meant to break him. He drowned the memory in wine and wits, in the arms of women who cared not who he was so long as he had coin. Yet somewhere deep within, the wound festered. The laughter he wore like armor hid the truth, that once he had known love, and it had been ripped from him by the man whose approval he craved most. Years later, the truth would come back to him, cruel and shattering. But for the boy Tyrion, the lesson of Tysha was clear. In this world, love was a trap, and family a chain of iron. Chapter 3. The Vale Ordeal. The road south from Winterfell was meant to be an easy one. Tyrion had left the wall with a clear conscience, having offered Jon Snow a few sharp truths, and Bran Stark the gift of a saddle that might let him ride again. He looked forward to meat, wine, and a feather bed at the next inn. Instead, he found Catelyn Stark. The Lady of Winterfell rose from her seat at the Crossroads Inn and, with quiet command, named him before the crowd. "In the name of King Robert and the House of Stark, I call upon you to seize this man. He conspired against my son's life." Steel scraped from sheaths. Fingers clutched his arms. Tyrion had little chance to protest. In an instant he was prisoner, carried eastward into the jagged spine of the Vale. The journey was misery. Mountain clans prowled the high roads, and Tyrion, bouncing in his saddle, could not help but think each bend might be his last. Yet even bound, his tongue was sharp. He needled Catelyn, mocked her evidence, and reminded her that lions were not easily caged. At last they came to the Eyrie, a castle of white stone perched among the clouds. There he was dragged before Lysa Arryn, pale and brittle in her widow's grief. She accused him of every crime whispered in Westeros, from plotting Bran's fall to poisoning Jon Arryn himself. Tyrion laughed in her face, and for that, she sent him to the Sky Cells. The Sky Cells were madness carved in stone. 3 walls and a floor, the fourth a sheer drop to the Vale below. Tyrion could scarcely sleep, knowing he might roll to his death. Yet even here his mind worked. He found allies in his jailer moored with promises of gold, and when brought again before Lysa, he demanded the ancient right of Westeros, trial by combat. The Knights of the Vale sneered. The imp was no warrior. Who would fight for him? "I will," said a lean sellsword with a wolf's smile. Bronn was his name, a man who weighed loyalty by coin and chance of survival. The duel was swift and brutal. Ser Vardys Edgen, Lysa's champion, fought in full steel, honorable but slow. Bronn danced lightly, darting in and out until the knight was weary and stumbling. Then, with a final stroke, he cut Vardys down and let him bleed on the stones. Tyrion was free. But he did not leave the Vale alone. On the high road, with Catelyn's escort disbanded, Tyrion parleyed with the very clans who had shadowed their march. The Stone Crows, Burned Men, Moon Brothers, Black Ears. He promised them gold, steel, and plunder if they would serve him. By the time he rejoined Lord Tywin's host on the Green Fork, the imp was no longer a captive but a commander, bringing with him savage new allies. It was the first time Tyrion proved what his father would not see, that though he could not win with sword and lance, he could still play the game of power and win. Chapter 4. The Hand Seat. The small council chamber stank of incense and fear when Tyrion first entered it as his father's envoy. King's Landing was a snake pit of intrigues, and the snakes had fangs as sharp as any sword. Cersei wore the crown's authority like armor. Joffrey wielded cruelty as if it were a game, and the realm groaned under the weight of war. Yet Lord Tywin was at Harrenhal, and so the lion sent his least-loved cub to govern in his stead. A test of truths. Tyrion wasted no time in sniffing out his enemies. To test which counselor betrayed him to Cersei, he whispered 3 different marriage plans for Princess Miachella, one to Pycelle, one to Varys, one to Littlefinger. When word reached Cersei of the match Pycelle had heard, Tyrion had his culprit. He descended upon the Grand Maester's chambers, found the old man cowering in his bedclothes, and ordered his beard shaved with a dagger's edge. It was not just a punishment, it was a warning. Shifting the board, Tyrion stripped Jon O'Slynt, commander of the Gold Cloaks, of office, exiling him to the wall. In his place, he installed Jacelyn Bywater, a man of iron will. With the city watch under his eye, Tyrion could breathe easier. He dangled promises before the sellswords, ensuring Bronn's loyalty with gold and license. He pried at Littlefinger and Varys with words and smiles, never forgetting they were vipers, but knowing vipers could be charmed. Most dangerous of all, he turned Lancel Lannister, his sister's bedwarmer, into his own spy. With Lancel's whispered reports, Tyrion knew each move Cersei made, even as she tried to play her games in shadow. A marriage across the sea. The kingdom's alliances were shifting, and Stannis Baratheon loomed on the waves. To check him, Tyrion reached far south. He sent his niece Miachella across the sea to Dorne, betrothed to Trystane Martell. The decision enraged Cersei, but Tyrion stood firm. "You think yourself sly," she hissed, but in truth, he was building bulwarks where she saw only insult. The fire in the dark. King's Landing was a city of wood, tinder waiting for a spark. Tyrion found his spark in the Alchemists' Guild. Their jars of wildfire could burn flesh, steel, and stone alike. While others mocked their old arts, Tyrion commanded the production of thousands of clay pots, a hidden arsenal beneath the city. And still he schemed. On the river, he had blacksmiths laboring night and day on a great chain to be stretched across the Blackwater. When Stannis came, he would find no easy harbor. A hand in truth. Through all of this, Tyrion was mocked as imp and halfman, sneered at by lords who thought him weak. Yet he walked the halls with his head high, his wit sharper
Chapter
than...
5, Blackwater. The night before Stannis Baratheon's ships were to sail up the river, King's Landing slept uneasily. The streets were thick with merchants, carts, soldiers' boots, and the scent of salt from Blackwater Bay. Fires burned in towers, casting long, wavering shadows across walls that would soon see blood. Tyrion Lannister, acting hand of the king, walked those walls alone, his cloak pulled tight around him, his short legs moving with the quick, quiet precision of a man who had learned to survive in a world that hated him. Around him, the city murmured. Whispers of halfman and imp followed him like ghosts, but he did not hear them. He only saw the river, dark and brimming, and the fleet that would bring death to the city come morning. Preparations of fire and steel. In the dungeons below the Red Keep, the Alchemists' Guild labored late into the night. Clay pots of wildfire were stacked in secret vaults, their contents volatile enough to burn 100 men or 100 ships to ash. Tyrion had seen their calculations, adjusted their placements, and smiled grimly. A single spark could turn Stannis' fleet into a funeral pyre. Above him, the iron chain boom across the river was being raised, each link heavy and threatening. Stannis would sail straight into it, trapped like a rat. Tyrion knew the gamble was perfect, if only the men at his command could hold until the moment came. The men and their fear. Tyrion went from tower to tower, speaking to the men, not as hand or lord, but as one of them. "Do you want to die at the gates, or do you want to fight?" he asked, voice low but steady. Some laughed, some cursed, some cried, but all listened. Even dwarfs could command loyalty when courage outweighed fear. He checked the walls, the gates, and the soldiers' supplies. Gold cloaks shuffled nervously, whispering that Joffrey would not lift a sword for them. Tyrion did not blame them. Kings were cowards. Lions could be cruel. Only deeds would matter tomorrow. The morning comes. At first light, the horizon was a ragged line of sails. Stannis' fleet pressed toward the bay, black against the pale morning. The chain had been secured, the wildfire carefully positioned. Tyrion's heart thumped in his chest, not with fear, but with the thrill of a gambler on the verge of a jackpot. He gave the signal. One ship, loaded with wildfire, drifted into the midst of Stannis' fleet. The wick was lit. The explosion was worse than any fire Tyrion had imagined. Green flames roared skyward, swallowing men, wood, and sea alike. Screams echoed across the water, metal twisted, wood cracked. Tyrion felt a grim satisfaction. Stannis' army was trapped, burned, and terrified. The king fails, but victory is never so simple. From the walls, Tyrion watched Joffrey retreat to Meager's holdfast, leaving the men to fend for themselves. Morale faltered. The Goldcloaks wavered. Some fled. Some turned on each other in panic. Tyrion's jaw tightened. If the city was to survive, he would have to lead them himself. The swordie. He donned armor, strapped an axe to his belt, and took the only soldiers who would follow him, Bronn among them, through the mud gate. The gates creaked as they swung open into chaos. Tyrion could see the first waves of Stannis' men press forward, ladders propped, rams shoved into the gates. "Do you want to die, or do you want to live?" He shouted, voice carrying over the din of men and steel. The soldiers rallied. His presence, his courage, even his stature inspired them. They clashed with Stannis' vanguard in a bloody melee. Tyrion fought with his short axe, hacking, parrying, ducking under swings meant for taller men. The smell of sweat, blood, and charred wood filled his senses. He laughed once, a hollow, terrible sound, when a man shouted, "Imp! Halfman, die!" and he cut him down. The tide turns. For hours, Tyrion led the charge, retreating and advancing as needed, marking weak points, plugging gaps in the wall with living flesh. The city held. The chain and wildfire destroyed much of the fleet, but at the cost of his own safety. When a knight of the Kingsguard, Sir Mandon Moore, tried to murder him from the shadows, Tyrion only survived because Bronn struck the man down. Bloodied and battered, Tyrion returned to the walls. The city was saved, but Tyrion's face bore the marks of war. He would never smile the same again. His nose was scarred, twisted, a reminder of the day he had led men to glory, only to be cast aside by a king and a sister who cared nothing for him. Aftermath and betrayal. By nightfall, the Tyrells and Tywin rode in to claim the victory. The city cheered, but not for him. Tyrion, the savior of King's Landing, was left in shadow. The walls stood, the fires burned, but the lion cub who had fought for them was forgotten, his deeds unseen, his pain unshared. He returned to the Red Keep with a quiet fury in his heart. The game was far from over. But Tyrion Lannister had proved, at last, that even a dwarf could shape the course of a kingdom. Chapter 7. The Purple Wedding and the Trial. The city of King's Landing had never seemed so golden. Flowers lined the streets, banners flapped in the wind, and the scent of roasted meats drifted through the warm air. Today, the realm celebrated the wedding of Joffrey Baratheon and Margaery Tyrell. Nobles laughed, courtiers whispered, and even the Goldcloaks seemed distracted by the procession. Tyrion Lannister watched it all from the shadowed hallways of the Red Keep. He was meant to escort the bride, but his mind was far from the pageantry. He thought of the men at the Blackwater, of the hidden wildfire that had saved the city, of the whispers in the council chamber. Yet none of that mattered now. The poison. Joffrey, gleeful and cruel, raised his cup in the sun. Tyrion observed with practiced caution, nodding who stood near, who bowed, who might act. Then the king drank. The laughter of the hall turned into screams. Joffrey choked, clawing at his throat, collapsing like a marionette with its strings cut. Chaos erupted. Tyrion's name was the first whispered by suspicion. He, the dwarf, the hated halfman, had motive enough in everyone's eyes. And though he did not raise a hand against Joffrey, the realm's hatred descended like a storm. Arrest and betrayal. Cersei's fury was immediate. "You did this," she hissed, her green eyes aflame with accusation. Tyrion could speak, protest, plead, but her words cut deeper than any sword. She, the woman he had tried to shield, pointed at him in the courtroom, calling him liar, lover, betrayer. Every word was a blade, piercing the last vestiges of trust he had held for her. The trial began. Pycelle, Meereen Trant, and all the witnesses stacked lies and half-truths. Tyrion's allies were few. Bronn waited outside, ready to defend. But inside the chamber, Tyrion faced the full wrath of family, crown, and court. Trial by combat. Tyrion demanded the ancient right of trial by combat. The choice was desperation and cunning intertwined. A gamble. His mind calculating odds faster than any sword could move. Oberyn Martell, the Red Viper, stepped forward. Tall, lethal, and flamboyant, he declared his purpose: vengeance against Gregor Clegane, who had murdered his sister. Tyrion's heart clenched with hope. Oberyn was brilliant, fast, and fiery. Yet in his desire for revenge, Oberyn faltered. Gregor struck with the force of a man possessed. Oberyn's spear danced, sliced, and jabbed. But in a single moment, the viper was pinned and crushed. Tyrion, watching, felt the weight of fate and cruelty. His champion was dead. The odds had turned. The sentence was final. Shattered bonds. The trial was over, but the damage extended far beyond guilt. Tyrion had been betrayed by Shae, humiliated before the court, and abandoned by the law he had once served. The city, once under his care, now saw him as villain. The imp, the clever, the loyal, the brave. he was reduced to a man with only his wits and fury left. In the solitude of his cell, Tyrion reflected on the truth Jaime would later reveal. Tysha, the girl he had loved so fiercely, had never been a whore. His father had lied. Even the one brother he trusted had been ensnared in deceit. The world was cruel, and Tyrion understood at last that in Westeros, survival required more than courage. It demanded vengeance, cunning, and the willingness to cross the boundaries no man should. The die was cast. Tyrion Lannister, the halfman, the imp, the lion cub who had saved a city, faced the end of all things he had known. And in that darkness, he began to plot the only path left. Escape and retribution could rewrite the lies. By the time the door swung open, she was gone from the world, a casualty of the cruelty she had set in motion. Tyrion stepped back, trembling, yet resolute. The imp had become executioner. The meeting with Tywin Lannister awaited in the privy, as if the world itself had led Tyrion to this single, fateful room. The father he had longed for, despised, and sought to impress, smiled with the cold cruelty of a lion surveying a cornered prey. "You'll die for Joffrey's death," Tywin said, calm, his voice like steel through silk. "No," Tyrion said. He smiled, for the first time free of fear. "You will." The moment was long, silent, electric. Tyrion drew his small, cruelly sharpened crossbow, the weapon that had been hidden beneath his cloak. Tywin, ever proud, ever precise, underestimated the danger of a man with nothing left to lose. One bolt, fired cleanly, and Tywin's life ended as abruptly as his control over Tyrion had. Liberation and exile. With the city burning in his heart, Tyrion fled through secret passages, aided by Varys the spider, whose webs of whispers had quietly prepared the imp's escape. He left behind the Red Keep, the city that hated him, and the life he had been forced to endure. Outside the walls, the night embraced him. The wind carried the scent of salt and smoke. Tyrion, the halfman, the dwarf who had fought and lost and killed and survived, felt a strange, cold exhilaration. He was free, yet freedom carried no comfort. Across the seas, unknown lands, and the treacherous roads of Essos awaited. Tyrion's vengeance was not over, only postponed. And in the quiet, beneath the stars, he swore a single promise. Never again would he allow the world to cage him, deceive him, or destroy him without answer. Tyrion Lannister, the imp, the lion cub who had fought fire, betrayal, and blood, now walked alone into exile, armed with wit, cunning, and a new resolve sharper than any blade. Chapter 9. The Road to Essos. The sea wind was bitter and sharp against Tyrion's face, carrying with it the taste of salt, freedom, and uncertainty. The ship rocked beneath him, small and unsteady, as if the gods themselves tested the imp's resolve. Behind him, the Red Keep and all its betrayals vanished into the horizon. Ahead lay Essos, a continent of strangers, gold, and peril. Flight through shadows. Varys had guided him, a spider whose webs had always touched every corner of the realm. The ship he boarded was discreet, crewed by men who asked no questions and cared little for the fame of Lannisters. Tyrion watched their eyes, learned their habits, and smiled quietly. Trust is earned in coin, not words. The voyage was not peaceful. Storms tossed the vessel, and whispers of pirate fleets and corsairs haunted the waves. Tyrion paced the deck, hand on the railing, calculating odds of survival. Even here, at the edge of the known world, the game continued. Arrival in Pentos. Pentos appeared like a jewel across the morning mist. A city of spired roofs, colorful markets, and shadowed alleys where fortune could be made or stolen. Tyrion walked the docks cautiously, taking in the unfamiliar tongues, smells, and dress. Every passerby was a potential friend or foe. He quickly secured a small house and began to gather information. Taverns, markets, and the local nobility became his chessboard. Each piece, each rumor, was a potential move. He spoke with merchants, thieves, and courtesans alike, learning who ruled in shadow and who ruled openly. Knowledge, he remembered, was the sharpest blade of all. New alliances. In the taverns of Pentos, Tyrion met Illyrio Mapates, a wealthy, rotund man whose smile hid more schemes than any court in Westeros. Tyrion's coin and wit earned him favor, and in Illyrio's house he found safety, guidance, and most importantly, a path forward. The world here was different. Power was traded in whispers and gold, not banners and armies. Tyrion adapted quickly. He began plotting, not revenge alone, but a way to wield influence in lands far from Westeros, lands where a dwarf could rise without the constant shadow of a lion's wrath. The weight of exile, yet exile bore its own burdens. He missed nothing of Westeros. He carried every insult, every betrayal, every scar in his mind like a map of pain. Shae's lies, Tywin's cruelty, Cersei's venom. They were all here, in memory, sharpening him, forcing him to grow beyond anger into something more dangerous. Strategy. At night, he walked the streets alone, observing, thinking, planning. The stars were unfamiliar, but the human heart was the same: greed, fear, ambition. Tyrion knew he could play these games, and in time, the world would notice. The beginning of a new game. In Essos, Tyrion Lannister was no longer the imp, no longer the pawn. He was a player. His past had forged him in fire. His exile would refine him. The roads ahead were perilous, the seas treacherous, but Tyrion had survived Blackwater, betrayal, and the Red Keep itself. Now, with coin, wit, and cunning, he would survive Essos, and in doing so, plot a future that none of Westeros's lions could foresee, and slaves. Every whisper told a story, every rumor hinted at opportunity. He noted the power of the great masters, the fear and hatred that fueled the gladiatorial pits, and the simmering unrest of freedmen. Tyrion's mind raced. A city ruled by fear could be tamed by cunning, if one knew the right levers to pull. the meeting with Varys. Even in exile, allies from Westeros appeared. Varys, the spider, materialized like a shadow in Tyrion's quarters. His advice was precise, practical, and dangerous. A city this large is like a lion. You can stroke its mane, but beware the claws beneath. Tyrion listened carefully, weighing each word. He knew Varys' webs were vast, and that in Meereen they could be the difference between survival and death. The pits and the politics. Tyrion observed the arena, where men fought for their lives, and the crowds cheered for blood. He felt no desire to fight himself, but every detail was a lesson. Fear could motivate, spectacle could control, and cruelty could maintain order. He met Daenerys Targaryen by circumstance briefly, at first as a clever observer of her court. She was young, fiery, and idealistic, ruling a city fraught with rebellion and hatred. Tyrion noted her strength, but also her inexperience. The two were alike in ways he understood. Both had survived a world that hated them. Both had been underestimated, and both could wield words sharper than swords. Playing the game. Over months, Tyrion began to influence events quietly. He brokered truces, advised on taxation, and nudged the freedmen and former slaves toward compromise with the ruling council. Every decision was calculated, every word measured. He had no armies yet, but he had strategy. And sometimes, strategy is more dangerous than steel. The weight of memory. Even here, Tyrion carried the ghosts of Westeros. Shae's betrayal, Tywin's death, and the Red Keep's shadows haunted him. But those memories had become fuel, refining his mind, teaching him patience, and reminding him that survival required adaptability above all else. In the streets of Meereen, among unfamiliar tongues and foreign laws, Tyrion Lannister was reborn. No longer just the imp, no longer merely a survivor. He was a statesman, a schemer, and a player in a game that spanned continents. And as the sun set over the bay, painting the city in gold, he smiled quietly to himself. Somewhere across the narrow sea, the lions of Westeros remained blind to the power that had left their grasp. Tyrion would bide his time. One day he would act. Chapter 11. The Ascent in Meereen. The city of Meereen was alive with danger and opportunity, and Tyrion Lannister moved through it with all the caution and cleverness that had kept him alive in Westeros. Here, the rules were different, the stakes unfamiliar, but human nature was unchanged. Greed, ambition, and fear ruled as surely as any king. The Council of Daenerys. Tyrion became an advisor to Daenerys Targaryen, the young queen whose dragons had begun to define the horizon. He studied her court, noting the delicate balance of power between freedmen, great masters, and her loyal, unsullied. Every word spoken, every gesture made, he recorded in his mind like a map of a battlefield. He learned quickly that Daenerys' idealism, while noble, left openings for exploitation. Tyrion used subtle persuasion, offering practical solutions cloaked in flattery. guiding her toward decisions that would strengthen her hold on the city. The queen came to trust him, perhaps too much, yet Tyrion understood that trust in this world was a weapon as well as a shield. Managing conflict, unrest simmered in Meereen. Former slaves demanded justice. The former masters resisted submission. Tyrion brokered compromises, proposing fair taxation, new governance, and measured punishments for rebellion. He became the bridge between extremes, walking the razor's edge between appeasement and authority. Even the gladiatorial arena became a tool. Tyrion suggested reforms, easing bloodlust without diminishing spectacle, proving to the city that order could be maintained without total oppression. In each careful maneuver, he reminded himself, knowledge and strategy outweigh brute force, but only if wielded deftly. Dragons and diplomacy. The dragons, symbols of Daenerys' power, were wild and unpredictable. Tyrion studied them from a distance, noting their patterns, their responses to command, their destructive potential. In their majesty and danger, he saw a reflection of his own life, underestimated, yet lethal when guided by wit and caution. He advised Daenerys on diplomacy as well. Envoys from Yunkai, Astapor, and the neighboring city-states arrived, some seeking trade, others plotting rebellion. Tyrion handled them with subtle cunning, never revealing the full measure of his influence, and leaving each visitor uncertain whether he was friend or foe. A man alone. Despite his growing influence, Tyrion remained alone. The shadows of Shae, Tywin, and Westeros haunted him. He longed for allies, but trusted few. Even in this foreign city, he felt the pangs of isolation, tempered only by the quiet satisfaction of survival and competence. Yet Tyrion Lannister understood the truth of exile. Survival is power, and power is the only currency in a world that despises weakness. Slowly, deliberately, he transformed himself from a refugee into a statesman, a man whose name, though unspoken in Westeros, would one day carry weight across seas and kingdoms. The imp's patience, and so Tyrion waited, not idle, but patient, calculating each move, each conversation, each alliance. He had learned in Westeros that the smallest man could cast the longest shadow, if only he knew how to move in silence. Above him, the sun dipped behind Meereen's spires, painting the city in a gold that seemed almost as rich as the coins Tyrion kept hidden. He allowed himself a small smile, the first of many to come. Tyrion Lannister, the imp, the lion cub exiled from home, had begun to ascend in a world where no one expected him to rise. And that, he thought, was precisely the advantage he needed.